First, Jeff, let me thank you for doing this again. I know you thought you'd gotten out of it when you started running for council, and I'm glad that no one opposed you so you could come back and do these interviews again. I've lived in Rowlett for a bit over 38 years. In 1981, when I completed my master's degree in economics, I got an offer from the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas, so decided to leave the PhD program because I really did not like doing economic research. So I came to Dallas and started doing economic research. And lived in Rockwall for a couple of years, and then in 1983 we moved into our first house in Rowlett over in the Tola Ridge 2 community. And then we liked it so much that 13 or so years later, when we sold that house, we built another house in Rowlett in 1997, which is where we live today. Now, over the last few years, I've got involved in three things. The first one was the Community Investment Advisory Board. I had intended to get on the Golf Advisory Board and found out that that's actually a reward for doing other boards. So I went ahead and stayed with the Community Investment Advisory Board through 2019 as an alternate member, and then in 2020 ended up chairing the group through the 2021 bond election. I also at that time got involved in the Charter Review Commission, as you well know, and we produced the ballot items for the 2021 Charter Review. And in the midst of all of that, based upon a post I saw on Facebook, I got involved with the take or pay issue for the city. I had become familiar with a product called change.org and decided that I could maybe do something about the take or pay issue, and created a petition which a lot of people will recognize, took off, and ended up getting me involved with the Public Utility Commission and with the former mayor, and eventually I think helped resolve, at least began the resolution of the take or pay issue for Rowlett. Before that, I did some cleanup with Keep Rowlett Beautiful. I was part of the crew that built the original Kids Kingdom way back when. I can't even tell you what year that was. Out of work, I had volunteered for an outfit called People Helping People, which went into some neighborhoods around Dallas and essentially painted their houses for people that could not afford to do so. I was the golf league president at work for about 7 years. And then as my kids were growing up here in Rowlett, I coached Little League, and I also coached some Pee Wee football. Actually, I was team mom for Pee Wee football. Well, this is a hard question for me because I'm not sure I really have a driving motivation. I am willing to serve for a number of reasons, largely because of the work I'd done recently with the boards. I saw some things that I thought could use some improvement, in particular in the bonding area. Some of the processes around the projects that are considered, thought they could use better definition. Likewise, in the presentation to citizens when those bonds are put out, I thought there was opportunity for clearer communication and probably a bit more granularity to make sure people understand what they're actually voting for. Also, I will say this in a polite way, I was not real happy with some of the prioritization that council had done with the projects that the CIAB had prioritized. We spent a lot of time coming up with priorities and put a lot of thought into it, and I felt that some of those priorities were, I don't say ignored, but were glossed over some other priorities that council had. So I thought, if I'm on council, then I get to set those priorities. Again, I don't know about the uniquely part. I have lots of experience in budgeting and managing large projects. I mentioned I went to work for the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas, and over the course of the years was involved in quite a few national projects that where I did a lot of design and project management. The other thing is, and this is not me speaking, but my reviewers when I was working, I tend to be very fair-minded, and I'm very good at taking my personal interest outside of the question at hand and analyzing it from an objective standpoint, no matter how it affects me. Well, I think I've put these out on my website, which I'll give you the address for later. Primarily, I would really like to see us as a community get started on the design process for Miller Road. There are only 2 east-west routes through town. Miller Road is one. I'm not a big user of that section of Miller Road, but a lot of times I will come up Miller from Rowlett Road and I'm turning left onto George Bush, and I can see traffic every evening is backed up all the way across the lake, and that's just not acceptable. A lot of folks think it can't get done because there are so many entities that need to be involved. I'd say they're right. If we don't get started, it will never get done. So the other ones, and I don't mean to impugn the city here, but financial transparency and trust. I see a lot of comments out on Facebook about disparaging comments about the motivations of city staff or council. I know the city works really hard to be transparent. They receive awards for their financial transparency. Excuse me, but I think we can do a better job in reporting on some of the things to the citizens that are going on, in particular bond projects. I had a question recently about the widening of Miller Road. The person thought it was already bonded. Well, that tells me that the city hasn't effectively communicated the section of Miller Road that has been bonded and the section that hasn't. So I think we can do a better job with financial status reports, project status reports, that kind of thing. As I also said on my website, I'm very interested in getting the internal audit program implemented. I think Rowlett is reached the size where that kind of a review by a third party can be beneficial. I've had some good conversations with the IT folks recently. I'm a little more comfortable around the preparedness for ransomware attacks, but especially with what's going on in the world today, having an outside CISA certified individual take a look at our IT functions would be, I think, a really good idea. I'm also thinking that, again, based on recent events, that we might want to take a look at some of our ethics policies and practices. The Federal Reserve Bank, as you might understand, is very, very concerned about the ethics of its staff, and I think I can bring some of the lessons I learned out of that job to how we manage that process in Rowlett. For about 7 years, I was actually running the system-wide application for the Federal Reserve that managed the ethics program. So I think that's probably about all I have in terms of why I want to do this that I can think of right now. Yes, I am in favor of the community investment program we have in place, which goes to a bond program about once every 3 years. The program is good because it keeps the tax rate for that investment at a level, so we're not paying more or paying less. We're not gravitating, not bouncing up and down. But I would say yes, subject to implementation of some of the changes that I included in the lessons learned document that I submitted to council after the last bond cycle. I mentioned before, I think the projects must be specific enough for the public to know exactly what is being asked. I think some of those projects were a little general. And I understand that the process at the time was to get some funding and then have come back to council after the fact and get some decisions made. But that goes to the level of trust. We really need to tell people up front, especially if we're funding the projects with borrowed money, which means a project is going to cost more than if we're paying for it on a cash basis. We really need to be specific about exactly what is being delivered and what exactly it's going to cost. And I think it's important that the projects appear on the ballot in a way that we're not trying to cover a less popular project with a more popular project, so that we have a bit more granularity in the propositions that are out there for the bond. It's been our practice, and this is maybe my mistake when we were doing a 2021 bond, it's been our practice to simply have 3 propositions. In retrospect, and one of the lessons learned that we wrote in there was maybe we need to be a little more granular so people can pick and choose exactly the things that they want to spend their money on. This is the big challenge for Rowlett. Back when I was on the board, and again just a few weeks ago, I confirmed with the Director of Public Works that we need something like $10 million over the next 10 years just to maintain the quality of the roads. Not to improve the quality of the roads, but to maintain the quality of the roads. So we've got to find the money to do that. I have been unhappy to see that over the course of the last 10 years, the city has been giving away impact fees to fund or to encourage residential development. I really don't think that that's necessary, especially in today's market. I think developers are going to develop. I got a sense that maybe the city was in a hurry to develop property. My training as a neoclassical economist says that's probably a mistake, that when the time is right, the money will be right and the development will occur. We really don't need to push hard for those things. On the other hand, the city has now reached a point where we're having difficulty maintaining our infrastructure. So to the extent that we are going to use incentives, we really need to encourage development that is positive for the budget. I've spent quite a bit of time with the FY21, FY22 budgets, looking at those with DALCAD, looking at property values and estimated taxes, and I can tell you that we really need to work on the projects that we approve and guarantee that they are going to be a positive impact to the city's budget. I also, this idea occurred to me just in the last couple of days. We have road impact fees, we have water impact fees, we have park impact fees. We don't have anything around public safety, at least not that I was able to find. May be mistaken there. It seems to me, especially when we're adding these large developments we're adding 500 people or 600 or 800,000 people, well, those are going to drive increased demand on our public safety budget, both police, fire, emergency, everything. And maybe we need to recognize that in our development process. This kind of follows my earlier conversation. I think it is time for a pause while the city considers the financial impact of multifamily developments. As you said in the question, we have quite a few going on, quite a few that are finished. I was looking back at a budget document from a few years back, and that one had us at 6% of our housing stock was rental property. We're now up to 14% of our housing stock is rental property. I've done some analysis on using the FY22 budget on the tax rolls on multifamily, and I can say what I am seeing is multifamily has a negative impact on our budget the way we're doing it. I actually put together a spreadsheet, which I will be posting later on my website, to come up with some examples. I'll try not to be disparaging of our friends who built these developments, but some raw numbers here. So we have a development, this is a market development whose market value is about $58 million. Estimated tax is about $431,000 a year. Seems like a lot of money until you consider how many people are going to be living there and what the average budget cost of a person in Rowlett is. When you compute that, the cost of the people living in that property, which is generating $431,000 in tax revenue, is $527,000 for a net deficit to the city of $100,000 every year. Now, I know the city forwarded an argument about multifamily that it would generate additional commercial, leading to greater tax increases through sales. But if you do the computation, that $100,000 in deficit property tax is going to require $10 million in retail sales to make up the difference. And if you look at the total retail sales in the city, and again, using the new population estimate of 73,000, do the computation, those additional 595 people in this particular development are going to generate only $5.7 million in retail sales, not the $10 million that we need to make this development be a positive impact. I ran the numbers for another, it was a 55 plus community. It's one for which we have a payment in lieu of taxes, or a pilot, scheduled to open this year, and the numbers are even worse. If I make the same assumption, which is 1.3 people per unit overall, it's a negative $200,000 per year in property tax for the city. If it's one person, it's still a negative $100,000 for the city. And there is no opportunity for that pilot payment to go up over the lifetime of that project, which I think is 15 years according to the agreement I read. So we need to look at these developments from an impact on our budget because we need to be able to maintain our infrastructure. And that's basically my point and why I was doing this. I ran a counter set of numbers, which I thought was interesting. So in the same area as the first project, I pulled up the tax values for single family homes. I pulled 4 homes together. They're on 10,000 square foot lots, so that's roughly an acre. Excuse me. They actually produce a net positive to the budget based upon, and this included one house which already has the senior freeze in place. Those 4 houses combined produced a net positive for the city budget of $645. Not a lot of money, but it's positive. It's a lot of money compared to a minus $100,000 a year. And if you take that 1 acre and translate it out to the 27 acres that the first project occupies, then the surplus becomes over $17,000. So I don't think that the argument that multifamily is going to drive our budget to a better place really makes sense. Zoning, and in particular spot zoning, has been a hot issue lately, both at some city meetings as well as out on Facebook. As a result, I had to do some research on this, as some of the other candidates have done. And this is my conclusion. So the comprehensive plan is supposed to guide council decisions. It is true that spot zoning has been ruled by the Texas Supreme Court as not being legitimate. On the other hand, the state statutes, sections 211 to 213, do provide some leeway around what a city can and can't do. And further, the case law that's out there gets very specific about when a city can depart or should depart from the comprehensive plan in doing zoning for individual pieces of property. In order to do so, the change should be based on a clear, I'm going to read this one, should be based on a clear public purpose. Assessment as to adverse impact to surrounding properties. It should say that there are no adverse impact to surrounding properties. It might be because of unique characteristics of the property, that the way it was classified under the comprehensive plan, it really can't be developed that way. Or it can be reclassified to promote the public welfare, meaning health, safety, morals, historical culture, and that kind of thing. And I've got to say, city staff, I think, does a very good job in preparing recommendations for planning and zoning and for council. They do consider all of these factors. I think they're well versed in what the statutes are around this. Where I think we've gone wrong is the occasions where planning and zoning council have gone counter to staff recommendations. There was one piece of property in particular which has been a point of concern of late off of Miller Road here. And I don't think it was made clear why planning and zoning or council departed from the comprehensive plan in that case. So to my view, it really is important that when planning and zoning or council are going to depart from the comprehensive plan, that they are very explicit in the reasons, and they must be within the category of those 4 reasons why they are doing so, and again, explain that to the public. So, and I don't know that they've done that in this particular case. So water rates are established based on 2 primary factors. There's the cost of purchasing the water, which we do from the North Texas Municipal Water District, and then there's the cost to deliver the water to the consumers in the city. As most people know now, for many years, Rowlett has been paying for a lot more water than we were using. I want to say when I started looking at this, we were paying for 3.2 billion gallons when we were only consuming 2.4, and we were paying something close to $1 million more a year for water than we were using. I think a lot of folks are aware of the petition. I mentioned that earlier in my public participation. I have to say, hats off to Mayor Tammy Danabashian. The petition kind of hit her out of the blue. She called me up and said, okay, what's going on? Let's talk. And she jumped on the horse and she rode that thing all the way to Austin, testifying to the Public Utility Commission. She got the customer cities together and put some pressure on. I worked with her, sending a number of letters to the Public Utility Commission to put the pressure on. We had, by final count, almost 4,000 signatures on that petition. Most of those actually occurred in the first 2 or 3 weeks. And we were able to make the news. The news coverage added pressure to the PUC. The PUC then was able to use that to apply pressure to the district. Interestingly, the district eventually, let's just say the executive director of the district eventually resigned, and then a settlement was announced. Unfortunately for us, that settlement had a very lengthy implementation period. There was an 8-year phase-in before calculating the 5-year rolling, beginning to calculate the 5-year rolling average of usage, which will eventually be the benchmark we use for the water we pay. There's still some question about when the 8 year starts for Rowlett, because we were already under contract, so we don't know if it started in 2020 or it starts when we renew our contract in 2024. Hopefully the former. And then, as if matters weren't already bad because of the lengthy lead-in, the district is now contemplating increasing the customer surcharge, which has been a nickel for a long, long, long time. They're talking about increasing that to 30 cents. Well, if you do the math, that comes up to about $960,000, so it kind of wipes out any savings we get from not having to pay for the extra water. I talked to Brian Funderburk about this a couple weeks ago. They are working on some studies about why that premium exists. There were multiple arguments brought forward by the district when this was before the PUC. I don't think any of them held water. I know the chairman of the PUC at the time said, she read the prospectus for the bonds, which was one of the arguments, that the premium is because the member cities have to back up the bonds with their own jurisdictional tax. Well, she said she read the prospectus and that doesn't hold water. So I'm very hopeful here, but getting this issue resolved may well require that Rowlett goes down the same path that the other petitioning cities went down, which is to file a petition with the PUC, pay the legal expense to get it done, and then try and get some recompense out of the district. So the other side of this, I mentioned there's 2 factors in the cost of water. That's the purchase cost of water. The other is the delivery cost. And I don't really know an awful lot about that aspect of it. I think all of us who end up on council should learn quite a bit about that, because it is the second largest fund that the city has behind the general fund. Just a little bit over $30 million for water distribution, wastewater treatment. So it is something that we need to understand. My experience in my 38 years here is that distribution has gotten much better. The water pressure is fairly consistent. We haven't had quite as many breaks in the main. I haven't seen sewer leaks in a lot of places. So, and I know we're doing a lot of work. I saw something, the ARPA funds that we got were used to do some water line looping, which has been a long project that the public utilities folks wanted to get done to help improve the overall distribution in the system. So, but again, I don't know enough about that aspect. What more can we do? We need to support the city manager in his work to get that contract renegotiated in 2024, and at the very worst, only pay the nickel premium. At the best, get rid of the premium. I have some thoughts around our pricing strategy at the retail level as well. I think maybe they're skewed towards the low usage end right now. Folks that are sitting on a 10,000 square foot lot are probably subsidizing folks who are sitting in an apartment right now. That's speaking off the top of my head. I have not done the math on that one yet. But I can say I've done this math, that if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and 8,000 square feet of it is landscaped, that to meet the expected 1 inch of water per week that the district says you should have requires 5,000 gallons of water. So if you water once a week for 4 weeks, you've used 20,000 gallons of water based upon the recommendation. And right now you pay a lot of money for that 20,000. Well, Rowlett, we didn't know this, I think, at the time, has a limited opportunity to provide incentives to businesses to come to Rowlett. Years and years ago, we voted into the DART system. I did not know at the time I voted for it that municipalities are allowed a 2% tax on top of the state tax. And what we were voting for at that time was a 1% tax for DART, thereby taking away one of our 2 cents, leaving 1 cent to cover the city. Most cities that did not get into DART are taking advantage of that extra 1 cent and using that to fund economic development. They set up economic development corporations. They allocate some or all of that 1 cent to that corporation. Under state law, those corporations have the ability to make loans directly to businesses, to make grants directly to businesses. A lot of things that the city itself can't do, even if it did have the money. So we are limited then in what we can do, and the city's been trying very hard to do economic development by providing incentives. The incentives we can offer are through fee waivers and through property tax rebates. Some of those I think have been fairly successful. I know some folks thought it was a sweet deal when D.R. Horton came to town. And it was a sweet deal for both D.R. Horton and for Rowlett. We gave up $40,000 a year in property tax for a period of time, and in return we got almost $1 million a year in sales tax. That's the kind of deal that I think we need to look for. The other thing I'd say is we can't be passive. We can't wait for businesses to come to us and ask. I'm seeing more activity from the economic development group that the city has, but I think we need to be reaching out. We've got a lot of competition. We've got the North Shore seems to be our last great hope for a very large development that could have a financial impact. But if you drive up the Bush Turnpike, a little farther north, you'll see that there are a number of properties up the way that look like they are more desirable right now. More desirable in the sense that they are closer to more transportation. They have service roads along the tollway, which we only have a limited amount of in Rowlett along the tollway. So we need to be active in identifying who we want to have come here and contacting them, even if it's cold calling. Like I said in one of my blogs, I'm willing to go out and talk to the landowners. I want to go find the businesses we want to come in here and try to get in and see them and see if we can't attract them here. So I think that's the first step in getting what we need. Yeah, I think I covered a good bit of this a little while ago in talking about multifamily. There's actually a FAQ out there on the Rowlett website that talks about why we were incentivizing multifamily development in Rowlett. And the idea was that it would draw in additional retail. I don't know if that has in fact happened. I look at some of the places where it went. Certainly, mansions by the lake over there on the tollway, there's no opportunity for retail there. Terralago, there was already retail across the street. I haven't seen a lot going over there. There's a few more drive-thrus on 66, but I'm not sure how much of that was just organic growth as opposed to driven by the fact that you now have multifamily apartments there. Maybe a little bit of both, if I'm being optimistic. So I think what we've got to do is focus our incentive efforts on attracting business. There is a business right now looking to try to get in the North Shore, and we've got some challenges to overcome there. I'm not convinced yet one way or the other. This is the Lakeview Business Park, I think it's called. Jackson and Shaw wants to build a number of warehouses up there. There's a huge demand in the country right now for warehouses. Warehouse space is at an absolute premium, so I understand why they want to do it. It has potential to generate something, forgetting numbers, about $700,000 to $900,000 a year in taxes. But it is still a warehouse district. It's not an entertainment district that a lot of people would like to see. It's not a multi-use development with retail and restaurants and integrated multifamily, that kind of thing. And it sits on arguably either the best or second best piece of the North Shore because it sits on the area that has a service road. Now they are, as most businesses do, are asking for incentives to come in and build that. I have not seen the details. They were talking about some traffic lights and that kind of thing using tax rebates. So, but that is the kind of thing that we need to look to. As a result of looking at that property, I looked at the property across the Bush Turnpike from there, which is, most of that property is held by the McEntee Trust up through that area. And I had this vision when I was looking at the big dam on the west side of the tollway where there's a lake behind there, a lot of open property, and the vision that came to mind was a development that just went in up in North Plano where they built a lake and then put restaurants all around the lake. And it's a beautiful place, and the place is packed all the time where you can't hardly get a seat in a restaurant. So how do we attract business into that? Well, it's what I was saying earlier. We've got to go find the big developer, the Lincoln Properties or the Blue Star, I think, or something like that has the kind of money to come into a large property like that, make it worthwhile to the McEntee family, and build the grand plan. I was very surprised and chagrined to learn that there is a piece of property in that area which already has a multifamily application on it for another 600 and some apartments. Again, there is no commercial around there. It's not going to drive any commercial likely unless you can come to some kind of agreement that they would build the commercial as part of the process, and I don't see that with that property. I'm not sure what the city can do about it at this point. When we implemented form-based zoning, there was a gap in that. Form-based zoning allowed multifamily without a special use permit. The council closed that loophole last fall, I believe it was. But in the meantime, the application got in, so they can do it if they want to. So, wrapping this one up, mixed-use developments, that seems to be the way things are going. I know I had a good conversation with the director of development the other day. She's very much on board with that kind of development where you've got commercial property on the first floor and residential property on the upper floors. That seems to work well in places like Legacy East and Legacy West. It draws in people with income. People with disposable income, which works as a catalyst, multiplier, draws other businesses in. So how do we get there? We use the property tax rebates that we've got. We use the impact fees if we can, but we've got to guarantee we do the analysis to make sure that the proposed development will be a positive impact to the budget and not a negative impact. Okay, so I'm going to first disagree. Property tax rates have actually declined over the past 5 years in Rowlett. The rates, we were at 78.7 cents per $100 5 years ago, and now we're at 74.5 cents. So we've had a bit of a decline. On the other hand, assessed value has been going up rather rapidly. So many people are probably experiencing a total higher dollar amount in their taxes. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, the state recognized this was going on. They passed Senate Bill 2, which limits city budget increases to 3.5% based upon existing property, so that if the existing property increases by more than 3.5%, the city actually has to reduce the tax rate to keep the revenue less than 3.5%, or they have to go to a referendum to the citizens to get the authorization to approve that budget of more than 3.5%. Now, all of that addresses the assessed value of existing property. It does not look at new property or new assessments for businesses, for Sapphire Bay, for whatever they're calling Lakeview Business District. That is new tax revenue that is then available for other projects. So I think part of the question was about, where do you get the money for the programs you mentioned? I think we would have to look to the assessments against new property. We've suddenly gone from a very stable price economy to a very inflationary economy, and I think we need to recognize that that's going to hit our city budget. Those trucks driving around fixing the potholes, they're paying more for gas too. We need to be prepared when we get into the budget process, which, Jeff, as you well know, starts as soon as the new council sits. I think there's a meeting that week on the budget, and figure out how we're going to deal with the increased cost. So I think the answer is some of that existing property is going to have to pay, I think, for some of that increase in city cost just to maintain our services. And we're going to have to look to new assessed valuation to be able to deal with anything new that we want to do, like try to catch up on our roads. Oh, public safety. I'm going to say first that I'm very unhappy that this has become a public issue. This is something that should have been resolved by city management and city council long before it became as large an issue as it has. Public safety is the number one responsibility of city government, period. Without that, all the rest goes by the wayside. I will say, though, I have not formed any firm opinions about what's going on out there because as a private citizen, I do not have access to verifiable factual information, and nor do I want access to people's personnel files who work for the city. If it is a morale problem, okay, the cause of the morale problem needs to be addressed. If it is a pay problem, the cause of the pay problem needs to be addressed. If it's both, they both need to be addressed. So, what steps would I follow? Without having specific knowledge, I would say is the general process. First of all, you got to talk to people that are involved in this, talk to them directly and honestly. You need to gather whatever documentation there is about this. You need to figure out what is wrong, figure out how to fix it, and do it. Sometimes fixing problems like this, especially morale problems, requires some draconian action. It's really hard to change a culture once that culture starts going down the wrong path. I've seen that in some projects that I was associated with that were not going well. It's not the people were bad. We were out looking for, not looking for blame in what's going on. We're looking for what went wrong. How do we fix it? How do we get the culture back where the culture needs to be? So, and that's really all I really want to say about it. It's never easy to solve a problem like this, but it is one of the more significant ones we're dealing with right now. So this is an interesting one. So Rowlett has been a bedroom community for a long time, and I still see it over the next 10 years or so being principally a bedroom community. It's not an employment center. I don't think anyone here would want to live in Addison right now, which Addison turned into an employment center and now you can't get around. But I see it as a bedroom community with pockets of urban living. One of the things that happened to us is that we now have a DART station. And if you've traveled the countryside, you know that where you have a mass transit station, you get urban living. We saw the market-based apartments going up on it's Melser Road up there. The Community Investment Advisory Board looked at that area and said, we've got an opportunity here. If we can turn this into a real pedestrian-friendly and beautiful area, both north and south of the railroad tracks there, we've got an opportunity to draw in that kind of entertainment district that people have talked about, where you can walk the shops like you do at the square in McKinney or the square up in Plano. There is an opportunity there. So as I said, it's a bedroom community, but with pockets of urban living. We're almost built out in the city. We have the North Shore left. Sapphire Bay, of course, is going on. Other than that, we're doing some infill here and there. I would like to see us manage that to where our density is not as high as it might be. I'd heard projections about 100,000. I'm thinking, we don't have the infrastructure to support that. And the way we're going, we're not generating the money to build the infrastructure to support that. So I'd rather see some of the lower density pieces of property developed as lower density pieces of property. Tammy and I agreed on a lot of things, but I did hear her make a comment at one time about how nobody's building 1 acre developments anymore because nobody wants them. Well, that's wrong. Nobody's building 1 acre developments anymore in this area because we have allowed the zoning changes to reduce those areas that have 1 acre zoning to be something more dense. I'm not in favor of doing that. I was driving the other day down, I believe it was Castle Drive, the borderline between us and, I guess in that case it was probably Wiley. It might have been Garland, I don't know exactly. And lo and behold, there on the side of the road was a sign for a development, 1 acre lots, right here in our little neck of the woods. I know a lot of people moved out this way for that. When we went to build our new house, we were on a small lot in Total Ridge 2. And we said, well, we're out of room. We want more land, and we want a bigger house. So we started looking, and we looked, and we looked, and we looked. And every time we started looking, guess where we ended up? We were out in Rockwall or Heath, where they were developing 1 acre lots. We were down in Sunnyvale, where they were developing 1 acre lots. We eventually got very lucky, knock on wood, and found a 1 acre lot in Rowlett and built our second house. And then the other ones along that same street, same thing. So people who wanted to stay in Rowlett were finally able to find a place to do that and move up. So I'd like to see us go down that path where we encourage that kind of development. And that gives us that kind of old home feel, I think, that a lot of people in Rowlett have moved out here to get. I heard a lot of it from the folks at the Homestead neighborhood when they were talking about the warehouse district, that I didn't move out here to be in the city. I moved out here to have a little more open space. Yet I can see where pockets of urban development make sense. Sapphire Bay, Main Street. Not sure where else. We might have some in the North Shore, depending on how that develops out. The other thing I see is the city developing more programs that allow people to age in place. I didn't touch a lot on the 55 plus communities. I did have to do a search. There are quite a number of communities around, several in Rowlett, several around the periphery of Rowlett. But I think a lot of people, I'm going to be 65 this year, I prefer to age in place. Yes, at some point I'm going to need some help looking after things, and I think the city can find ways to do that. I think that'd be a good assignment for the Senior Advisory Board to look at what the city needs to do to help people age in place. In 10 years, and I'll smile when I say this, I see people hiking and biking across the New Miller Road Bridge, waving to the people who are fishing off the side of the bridge. So I'm hoping I can get that done, at least get it started, not done. I see people enjoying a concert at the revitalized Herforth Park in downtown. There is a multifamily complex going in right there, but we still have a good bit of property. The plans for that are done. We did not approve the money in the bond package to develop that, but I think that would be a good incentive to draw business into downtown Rowlett. I heard the comment that we don't need another walking park, but the people who want that urban feel in downtown that is going to draw in the restaurants and the coffee shops and the specialty retail and things like that we want to see, they're going to want that park. So I'd like to see us find a way to get that done. And last, I see me sitting on my front porch waving to the folks walking by just like I do today. So the answers are distinctly no and no. At the time, I was looking forward to finishing up my work on the Charter Review Commission and the CIAB so I could get back to my life, go back to play more golf. It was a lot of work to be on those two commissions. I don't regret the time I spent doing that work. I think it was valuable both for the city and for myself. And at the time I was thinking, what fool would want to be on council? They work all the time and they are underappreciated. So, why did I decide? And I have to say I was a late decider. I did not decide to seek council until until Blake turned in his resignation to run for mayor. And really the driver for me was what I had said before. The two principal ones were I want to get Miller Road started and I want to get that internal audit function in place. I became aware back when we were in Charter Review Commission about a hack the city of Carrollton experienced. Partly because someone I knew was working there and basically was out of work for 2 weeks because their computer systems were completely down. They could not do anything. I am assured that we're in better position, but I'm not assured by someone who is CISA certified. For those of you who don't know, CISA is the Cyber Information Security Administration. There's a whole series of things you need to learn and test out to be CISA certified. And let me tell you, I did quite a bit of work around information security with the Federal Reserve Bank. And it was a boatload of work to be secure. I have faith in our IT people here, but I think giving them that extra assurance would be helpful. So that really was a driver. As I've gotten into it, there's some other things I've looked at. One fellow I talked to wanted to do something about the trucks going up and down Rowlett Road. So I've actually already started that process. I went to the council a couple weeks ago. Since then, I've actually written an ordinance and sent it to the mayor and to the city manager to consider to get the trucks off of Rowlett Road. I think we may get some traction there. Some other things I was thinking about, I mentioned the ethics area. Again, going back to the trust issue, I think I can contribute here because I spent a lot of time in an organization who is very, very highly values ethics, because if you don't trust the Federal Reserve, then you don't trust your money. You don't trust the financial system, then this country's in a world of hurt. So I think there are lessons to be learned and brought to the city from that. So those really were, the factors that brought me here. It was not anything to do. My position on the pay, it's like, well, they work hard. It's a pittance. Whether we leave it the same or increase it, it's not a lot of money. On the term limits, it still brings a smile to my face that right now you can run and get on council, serve 2 terms, take a year off, run and get on council, serve 2 terms, get off. So basically you can be a council person for life, or you can serve 2 terms on council, 2 terms as a mayor, 2 terms as council, 2 terms as mayor, be on for life. I don't know that there's a lot of advantage to the incumbent in a city election like this, and certainly not like there is with Congress, where you've got a mail budget and a staff and everything that, even though they're really not supposed to, can help you get reelected. So I'm kind of ambivalent about that. I was ready to go with the flow, which is pretty much what I did. Did not influence how I recommended things for the charter review or deciding to run for council. So it might have convinced me the other way, to not run for council. So again, thank you, Jeff, for doing this. I know you didn't have to. You could have just sat back and waited till May 7th and then taken your oath in your seat. If I have fumbled some of the answers to the questions here because I'm sitting in front of a camera and that makes me nervous, I do plan to write my answers out longhand and post them to the blog on my website. I promised I'd give you that. It's brian4rowlett.com. That's Brian, number 4, Rowlett.com. I'm wishing I had trademarked that 4 thing, because I used that for the water petition. Everybody's using it. I want to thank those of you who have watched this entire interview. It's probably longer than you expected. I hope I have answered your questions. If not, please feel free to send me your questions at brian4rowlett@gmail.com. I've said elsewhere, and I'll say it here, it's nice to see so many people willing to stand for office. I can remember times when we, as voters, really didn't have choices. I don't know if that was because no one wanted to do it or the people were doing such a good job, but it's nice to be able to go out and research and pick the person you think will do the best job. I also will say that I've met all of the candidates, the mayoral and the council candidates. Every one of them is in it to do the best for Rowlett. I'm very happy with the crop of people we have here. You know, we may have differences, but the differences are heartfelt and honest. So I think that's important. I will say hello to my fellow Place 1 candidate, Stephanie Higgins. We have had a chance to visit a few times since this race began. We got to sit through candidate forum together. And of course, we had the drawing for our position on the ballot. We've had some great conversations. Stephanie is smart. She is dedicated. She is energetic. I'd like to think that I'm a better choice because of my experience. On the other hand, you can't go wrong voting for either one of us.